Imagine a place so hostile, so utterly devoid of warmth, that NASA uses it as a dress rehearsal for Mars. You are standing at the bottom of the world, surrounded by a white silence that stretches for thousands of miles. A frozen desert where the wind screams across ice sheets thicker than the height of mountains. Here, on the surface, life is a rounding error, a desperate anomaly clinging to the fringes of a continent that seems to want it dead. Your breath freezes instantly in the air, a constant reminder that you are an intruder in a realm built for solitude. This is the Antarctic, the largest and coldest desert on Earth, a place we intuitively understand as a graveyard. But what if I told you that the true horror of this place isn't the emptiness above the ice, but the crowding below it? Beneath your boots, separated by a few meters of frozen armor, lies a paradox that biologists are still struggling to comprehend. We call this a marine desert, a label that implies scarcity and death, but the reality is far more unsettling. Down there, in the suffocating dark, life isn't just surviving. It is exploding in a riot of ancient, twisted forms that have no business existing. It is a sealed tomb, cut off from the sun and the atmosphere, yet it holds an ecosystem so dense and so violent that it rivals the most vibrant coral reefs in the tropics. The ice doesn't just cap the ocean. It imprisons it, creating a pressurized, supercooled laboratory where evolution has taken a very different, very dark turn. To understand this alien world, you have to understand the water itself, which defies the laws of physics as you know them. In your world, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, a comfortable, predictable rule. But here, the salt content twists that rule, allowing the ocean to drop to nearly -2 degrees without turning to solid ice. It is water that is technically colder than freezing, a liquid frost that should, by all rights, be solid stone. Swimming in it would feel like being stabbed by a million tiny needles, a sensation of cold so intense it burns like fire. This supercooled fluid circulates endlessly, carrying oxygen and nutrients, but also carrying a profound, bone-deep chill that slows time itself. Why does this matter? Because in this impossible cold, metabolism slows to a crawl. Hearts beat slower. Growth stretches out over centuries. Death takes a long, long time to arrive. The creatures here are living in slow motion, ancient biological machines that have been drifting in the dark since before humans walked upright. They are not merely animals. They are ghosts of a previous geological epoch, preserved by the cold and the crushing pressure. The isolation of the Antarctic continent has allowed them to evolve in a vacuum, cut off from the rest of the planet's genetic mixing bowl for 30 million years. As we drill through the ice, the light from the surface fades into a deep, bruising blue, and then, finally, into absolute blackness. The transition is jarring. One moment you are blinded by the infinite white of the polar day, and the next you are engulfed in a void where eyes are useless. But listen closely, and you will hear that this void is not silent. It groans with the shifting of gigatons of ice, a constant, grinding reminder of the weight pressing down from above. It is the sound of a planet breathing, heavy and slow. And in that darkness, something is waiting for us. You might expect to find a barren mudflat down here, a mirror image of the desolate white desert above. Instead, the beam of our ROV lights up a chaotic, writhing carpet of life. There are sponges the size of barrels, soft corals that glow in colors the sun has never touched, and things that defy simple classification. This is the benthos, the sea floor, and it is crowded with residents who have adapted to the dark in terrifying ways. They don't need eyes. They feel the pressure waves of their prey. They taste the chemical trails in the water. They are the masters of a domain where we are merely fragile, soft-bodied tourists. But the true horror isn't just the creatures. It's the fragility of the barrier that separates us from them. That layer of ice is the only thing keeping our world of air and light separate from their world of crushing dark. Breaks in the ice are not just cracks. They are portals, allowing the two worlds to bleed into each other with catastrophic results. We tend to think of the ice as a solid floor, but in reality, it is a dynamic, treacherous ceiling that can turn against the life below in an instant. The boundary is porous, and when it fails, the consequences are swift and frozen. So, take a final breath of that biting, dry air because we are going down. We are leaving the world of mammals and lungs behind to enter a place where the water itself can become a weapon. We are descending into the realm of the brinacle, the icy finger of death that reaches down from the ceiling to claim anything too slow to escape. It is a phenomenon that looks like magic and kills like a sniper, and it is the first sign that down here, the very laws of nature are conspiring to kill you. Welcome to the true Antarctic desert, where the only thing more dangerous than the cold is what's hiding inside it. We are now just beneath the ceiling of the world, floating in the shallow, deceptive twilight where the ice meets the ocean. At first glance, this place possesses a fragile, crystalline beauty. The underside of the sea ice glows with a spectral blue light, filtering the harsh sun from above into something soft and ethereal. It looks peaceful, almost holy, like the vaulted ceiling of a submerged cathedral. But do not let the tranquility fool you. In this realm, the ice is not just a roof. It is a factory that manufactures death. The danger here doesn't have teeth or claws. It is made of the water itself, a silent assassin born from the physics of the freeze. As the sea ice above us thickens in the bitter Antarctic winter, it does something strange. It purges itself. The freezing process forces salt out of the ice crystal structure, creating pockets of brine that are incredibly salty and denser than the seawater around them. This brine is also supercooled, far colder than the freezing point of ordinary seawater. It becomes heavy, a frigid syrup that can no longer stay trapped in the ice. Eventually, gravity takes over, and the brine begins to leak downwards, escaping through tiny fractures in the frozen ceiling like blood seeping from a wound. What happens next is one of the most terrifying natural phenomena on Earth. As this supercold plume descends, it comes into contact with the warmer seawater below. The reaction is instantaneous. The seawater freezes on contact with the sinking brine, forming a hollow tube of ice around the descending plume. It looks like an inverted tornado, or a jagged, white stalactite growing visibly before your eyes. This is a brinacle, nicknamed the finger of death, and it is reaching for the bottom with a slow, purposeful inevitability. Watch it grow. It extends downward, inch by inch, a delicate, crystalline lance piercing the dark water. It is beautiful, yes, but it is also a catastrophic weather event contained in a single column of ice. Everything it touches is encased in an instant tomb. If you were to touch it, your skin would freeze to it instantly, the heat sucked from your body in a heartbeat. But the real horror awaits below, on the seabed, where a thriving community of starfish and sea urchins is going about its slow, patient lives, completely unaware of the sword hanging over their heads. The tip of the brinacle finally makes contact with the seafloor. It doesn't stop. The supercooled brine spills out from the tube and begins to flow downhill like an invisible, freezing river. This is not water as these creatures know it. It is a wave of instant glaciation. The web of ice spreads rapidly across the bottom, overtaking the slow-moving residents of the deep. There is no panic, no thrashing, because there is no time. The cold travels faster than they can crawl. In a matter of seconds, a vibrant patch of the seafloor is turned into a graveyard of statues. Starfish are frozen mid-crawl, their arms rigid, encased in a rime of white frost. Sea urchins are sealed in blocks of ice, preserved perfectly in the moment of their death. It creates a morbid, silent garden of white shapes, a sudden monument to the lethal power of temperature. The brinacle has claimed its victims, leaving behind a scar of ice that stands out starkly against the dark mud. This phenomenon reveals the true nature of the Antarctic Ocean. It is an environment where stability is a lie, where a shift of a few degrees or a change in salinity can turn the very medium of life into a weapon. The creatures here survive on a knife's edge, adapted to the cold but defenseless against this hyper-concentrated assault. It is a reminder that we are visitors in a hostile dimension, observing forces that operate with a cold, mathematical cruelty. But the brinacle is a danger of the shallows, a threat that comes from above. As we leave the frozen graveyard behind and sink deeper, the threats change. The light from the surface is gone now, swallowed by the depth. We are entering the twilight zone, where the pressure begins to mount and the cold remains constant. Here, the horror isn't about freezing to death. It's about what the darkness has done to the bodies of those who live in it. We are entering the land of giants. We descend further now, leaving the icy ceiling far above. The light from the surface is fading, turning from a vibrant blue to a heavy, oppressive indigo. We are entering the twilight zone of the Antarctic, a place where the rules of biology seem to warp under the weight of the cold. Up here, time doesn't flow like it does in the warm world above. It drips. The temperature is stable, the water is still, and the oxygen levels are incredibly high. It is this potent cocktail, extreme cold and rich oxygen, that allows for a phenomenon that sounds like science fiction: polar gigantism. In most of the ocean, oxygen is a limited resource. Animals have to work for it, pumping water over gills or surfacing to breathe. But here, the freezing water is saturated with oxygen, holding far more of the gas than warm tropical seas ever could. This abundance removes the invisible leash that usually limits how big a creature can grow. Without the need for complex, energy-hungry respiratory systems, simple life forms can just keep growing. They expand in the dark, swelling to impossible proportions like balloons filling with too much air. Out of the gloom, a shape emerges that instantly triggers a primal recoil in the human brain. It is a spider, but not like any spider you have seen on land. This is a pycnogonid, a sea spider, and it is the size of a dinner plate. In the warm oceans of the world, its cousins are tiny, barely the size of a fingernail, easily overlooked on a piece of coral. But here, in the oxygen-rich deep, the Colossendius has grown into a spindly, terrifying giant, spanning over 70 centimeters from tip to tip. It moves with a slow, hydraulic jerkiness, like a marionette being operated by an unskilled puppeteer. Its legs are impossibly long and thin, radiating out from a body that seems far too small to support them. And that body is too small. This creature is so committed to its monstrous size that it has run out of room for its own internal organs. Its stomach and reproductive organs have been pushed out of its torso and down into its legs. It is a walking digestive system, a skeleton made of appetite. Watch closely as it hunts. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need to. In this slow-motion world, speed is an unnecessary luxury. It stalks across the sponge beds with a terrifying patience, using a long, straw-like proboscis to suck the fluids out of its prey. It breathes through its skin, passively absorbing the oxygen that surrounds it, a silent ghost that requires almost no energy to exist. It is a creature stripped of all urgency, a biological machine optimized for a world where nothing ever changes. The horror of the sea spider isn't just its size, it's what it represents. It is living proof that the environment shapes the monster. These creatures aren't genetic freaks. They are the logical conclusion of evolution in a freezer. They have traded speed and warmth for size and longevity. Some of these giants may be decades old, marching across the seafloor with the slow, inevitable cadence of a glacier. They are ancient, fragile kings of a silent kingdom. Surrounding them are other giants of the deep, isopods the size of shoes, worms that look like thick ropes, and sponges that have stood in the same spot for centuries. It feels like a hallucination, a fever dream where the familiar scale of the world has been broken. You are a tiny, fragile intruder in a land of slow-moving titans. But even here, in the land of giants, there is still just enough light to see. Now, we must leave the twilight behind. The indigo fades to black, and the last photons of sunlight are swallowed by the depth. We are going deeper into the midnight zone, where the pressure builds to crushing levels and the water is as black as ink. The giants we leave behind are unsettling, yes, but what lies below them is something else entirely. Down there, in the absolute dark, evolution has produced creatures that don't just look alien, they act like they belong to a different universe entirely. We have now crossed the invisible line into the midnight zone. The water here is no longer blue. It is a heavy, crushing blackness that feels less like a liquid and more like a solid weight pressing in from all sides. Your eyes are useless here. In this realm, sight is a memory, replaced by the acute, terrifying awareness of vibration and chemical trails. The silence is absolute, broken only by the groans of the ice miles above, filtered down through the water like the echoes of a dying world. It is here, in this sensory void, that we find creatures that have abandoned the basic template of what we consider an animal. Drifting out of the darkness comes a shape that defies easy description. At first, it looks like a severed plant, a tangled mass of roots floating without purpose. But then it pulses. This is the Antarctic strawberry feather star, a name that sounds whimsical until you see the thing in motion. It is not a single entity so much as a writhing explosion of limbs. It possesses 20 arms, some long and feathery for swimming, others short and hooked for grasping, all radiating from a central, bulbous body that resembles a deformed strawberry. It doesn't swim like a fish. It thrashes with a rhythmic, alien coordination, looking less like a biological organism and more like a nervous system that has ripped itself free from a body. For decades, scientists looked at these creatures and assumed they were all the same, a single species of deep-sea detritus. But we were wrong. Recent genetic sequencing revealed that what we thought was one animal is actually a cryptic species complex. A hidden family of monsters masquerading as one. They have been down here for millions of years, diversifying in the dark, hiding their true nature from us. It forces you to ask, if we missed this, what else is swimming just past the edge of our lights? The feather star is a passive feeder, waiting for the marine snow, the dead flakes of skin and poop falling from the surface, to drift into its arms. But it is not the only thing waiting. Down here, death is a resource that is never wasted. On the sea floor, the bones of a fallen whale become a bustling city of horrors. This is the domain of the ostacs, the zombie worms. These rootless, mouthless creatures drill into the bone using acid, digesting the fats trapped inside the skeleton. They are the recyclers of the abyss, ensuring that nothing, not even the hard calcium of a ribcage, survives the hunger of the deep. Watching this ecosystem function feels like peering into the internal workings of a machine designed by a madman. It is efficient, yes, but it is cold and utterly devoid of mercy. The feather star pulses through the black water, its 20 arms tasting the currents for the scent of decay. The zombie worms dissolve the remains of giants. It is a world built entirely on the consumption of the dead, a perpetual engine of recycling fueled by the corpses that rain down from the sunlit world above. This is not a habitat. It is a digestive tract. Every inch of this water is alive with the intent to consume. And yet, amidst this frenzy of hunger, there is a strange, hypnotic beauty. The way the feather star moves, its arms undulating in perfect, mathematical unison, is mesmerizing. It is an ancient dance, choreographed in the dark long before the first dinosaur walked the earth. It is a reminder that life does not need our approval, or even our comprehension, to thrive. But as strange as the feather star is, it still follows the basic rules of life. It moves, it eats, it reacts. It is a predator or at least a scavenger. But what if I told you that deeper still, buried under hundreds of kilometers of solid ice shelf, there is something that breaks the rules entirely? Something that shouldn't be there, not because it's strange, but because it's impossible. We are moving now towards the grounding line, the place where the ice shelf meets the seafloor. This is the end of the ocean, the final frontier where the water is squeezed into a thin, high-pressure wedge between the rock and the ice. It is a place of stillness, darkness, and starvation, geographically cut off from the food sources of the open sea. By all logic, it should be a tomb. But when we drilled a hole through the ice to check, the camera didn't show us mud. It showed us a garden. If you thought the midnight zone was the end of the line, you were wrong. We have one last descent to make, and it takes us to a place that shouldn't exist. We are traveling hundreds of miles inland, away from the open ocean, to a spot where the ice shelf is nearly a kilometer thick. This is the Filchneron ice shelf, a frozen slab the size of Spain floating on top of the blackest, coldest water on Earth. In 2021, a team of geologists bored a hole here. They weren't looking for life. They were looking for mud. They lowered a camera down a narrow borehole, expecting to see a barren, lifeless seabed, a true marine desert. The camera hit the bottom 1,200 meters down. The water was pitch black, the temperature a lethal -2.2 degrees Celsius. At first, the feed showed exactly what they expected. Nothing. Just the endless, crushing dark. But then, the camera bumped into a boulder. In the open ocean, a rock is just a rock. But here, in the absolute void, that single boulder shattered our understanding of biology. Clinging to the stone were strange, stalked creatures and sponges, standing like silent sentinels in a tomb that has been sealed for thousands of years. Pause for a moment and let the impossibility of this sink in. These animals are stationary. They are sponges and stalked ascidians, filter feeders that cannot move. In the open ocean, they survive by catching bits of food drifting down from the sunlit surface. But here, they are trapped under 900 meters of solid ice, 260 kilometers away from the nearest open water. There is no sunlight, which means no photosynthesis, which means no food chain. There is no marine snow falling from above because the ceiling is solid ice. By every rule in the biological playbook, these things should be starving. They are ghosts, living on a diet of nothingness. To survive here, food would have to drift horizontally for over 100 miles without being eaten by anything else along the way, a journey that scientists calculate is statistically impossible. Yet there they were, captured on grainy video, twitching in the current. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. This discovery forces us to ask a question that makes biologists very uncomfortable. What are they eating? Is there an unknown energy source down here, seeping out of the rock itself? Or have these creatures slowed their metabolism down so much that they are barely alive, sipping on the microscopic traces of nutrients that drift by once a decade? They are like biological statues, frozen in time, waiting for a meal that might never come, yet somehow refusing to die. The existence of this impossible garden changes everything. We used to think that life required a certain set of conditions: light, heat, abundant food. But these sponges are flipping the bird to those requirements. They are living in a place that is effectively a wet, frozen rock in space. They are not just animals. They are anomalies. They suggest that life is not a fragile flame that needs protecting, but a stubborn, pervasive infection that will take root in the most hostile cracks of the planet. Looking at that footage, you get a feeling that is hard to shake. A sense of intrusion. We were never meant to see this. These creatures have been living in the dark, under the ice, in total silence, perhaps since before the pyramids were built. They are the ultimate recluses, hidden away in the basement of the world, guarding a secret that we still don't understand. They are a testament to the fact that nature doesn't care about our rules. If life can exist here, in this cold, starving, pressurized hell, then the boundaries of the habitable zone are much wider than we thought. And if life can thrive under the ice of Antarctica, feeding on the dark itself, then we have to look up. Because there are other balls of ice floating in the solar system, and they have oceans much deeper and much darker than this one. So, what does a rock covered in sponges at the bottom of the world have to do with the stars? Everything. For decades, we have looked up at the night sky, scanning for radio signals or green planets, assuming that life needs a Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, with plenty of sunlight. But the Antarctic deep is teaching us that we have been looking for the wrong thing. The ecosystem we found under the Filchneron ice shelf isn't just a curiosity. It is a blueprint for the most common type of habitat in the universe. Consider Europa, the icy moon of Jupiter, or Enceladus, circling Saturn. Both are frozen, white worlds that look uncomfortably like Antarctica. Beneath their cracked, frozen shells lie global oceans of liquid water, kept warm by the gravitational kneading of their gas giant parents. We used to think these were dead worlds. But if a sponge can grow in the pitch black, hundreds of kilometers from sunlight on Earth, why couldn't a similar creature be pulsing in the dark oceans of Europa right now? This realization triggers a shift in perspective that is both thrilling and terrifying. We tend to think of our blue, sunlit ocean as the normal one. But statistically speaking, we are the freaks. The standard model for an ocean in our solar system isn't a warm, open-air bath like the Pacific. It is a sealed, pressurized, ice-capped darkroom. The marine desert of Antarctica is not an exception. It is the rule. The universe might not be full of forests and birds, but it could be absolutely teeming with things that look like that strawberry feather star. There is a distinct horror in this idea, the cosmic iceberg. It suggests that the universe is full of life, but it is all locked away in the dark, hidden beneath miles of frozen armor. We are shouting into the void, looking for other civilizations, while the real party is happening in the basement, in the cold and the quiet. These potential alien ecosystems would be totally indifferent to the stars, evolving in a closed loop of recycling death, just like the zombie worms and the sea spiders. And this brings us back to the true nature of the Antarctic. It is not just a continent. It is a portal to an alien reality. When we stare into a hole drilled through the ice, we aren't just looking down, we are looking out. We are seeing a preview of what awaits us when we finally send a probe to drill through the crust of Europa. The monsters we find down there, the giants, the living nervous systems, the ghosts on the rocks, are the closest things we have to extraterrestrials. So, the next time you look at a map of Antarctica and see that big, empty white space, don't think of it as a dead zone. Think of it as a lid. Beneath it, the ocean is dreaming a very different dream than the one we know. It is a world where time moves slower, where death is just another form of fuel, and where the dark is not empty. Perhaps the most unsettling thought is not that we are alone in the universe, but that we are surrounded by life that we can't see, and that wouldn't understand us if it could. We live on the thin, fragile skin of a planet, bathing in radiation from a nearby star, convinced that we are the masters of biology. But down in the crushing deep, the old masters are waiting. They were here before us, and in their frozen, slow-motion citadel, they will likely be here long after we are gone. The ice is not protecting them from us. It is protecting us from the realization that we are the anomaly. We are the fragile ones, clinging to the surface, while the true citizens of the universe drift in the eternal cold dark. Sleep tight,